Karoline Leavitt defends a hardworking janitor against an elitist CEO. A story of courage and justice. The tension in the room was palpable. The sleek, glass-walled boardroom of one of the nation's most powerful corporations was filled with executives in tailored suits, their faces stern and unyielding. At the center of the room stood a man in a simple uniform, his hands calloused from years of hard work. He was Joe Martinez, a janitor who had dedicated over 2 decades of his life to keeping the company's offices spotless. Today, he was fighting for his job and his dignity. Across the table sat the company's CEO, Alexander Grayson, a man known for his ruthless efficiency and disdain for anything he deemed unproductive. Grayson had decided to cut costs by outsourcing the janitorial staff, a move that would leave Joe and dozens of others without jobs or benefits. But what Grayson didn't expect was that Joe had an unlikely ally. Karoline Leavitt, the rising conservative firebrand who had made it her mission to fight for the forgotten men and women of America. This was no ordinary boardroom meeting. This was a battle between the elite and the everyday, between greed and justice. And Karoline Leavitt was about to deliver a performance that would leave the room and the nation stunned. The setup, a janitor's plea. Joe Martinez had worked for Grayson Enterprises for 22 years. He had started as a young man, cleaning offices late into the night while studying English as a second language. Over the years, he had become a fixture in the company, known for his cheerful demeanor and unwavering work ethic. He had cleaned up after countless board meetings, often unnoticed, but always appreciated by those who took the time to acknowledge him. But now, at 58 years old, Joe was facing the unthinkable. The company had sent out a memo announcing that all janitorial staff would be replaced by an outside contractor. The move would save the company millions, but it would also strip Joe and his co-workers of their pensions, health care, and job security. Desperate, Joe reached out to Karoline Leavitt, who had gained a reputation for standing up for blue-collar workers. She didn't hesitate to take up his cause. "This isn't just about Joe," she told her team. "This is about every hard-working American who's being pushed aside by corporate greed. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win." The boardroom battle. Karoline takes the floor. The meeting began with Grayson laying out his case. "This is a business decision, pure and simple," he said, his voice cold and detached. "Outsourcing will allow us to allocate resources more efficiently and remain competitive in a global market. Sentimentality has no place in business." Karoline, seated beside Joe, waited patiently for her turn to speak. When it came, she stood, her presence commanding the room. "Mr. Grayson," she began, her tone calm but firm, "you talk about efficiency and competitiveness. But what about loyalty? What about integrity? Joe Martinez has given 22 years of his life to this company. He's cleaned up after you, your executives, and your shareholders. And now you want to throw him out like yesterday's trash." Grayson scoffed. "Ms. Leavitt, with all due respect, this is a corporation, not a charity. We can't afford to keep employees who don't contribute to the bottom line." Karoline's eyes narrowed. "Don't contribute? Joe and his co-workers are the backbone of this company. They keep your offices running smoothly so that you can focus on your bottom line. And yet, you're willing to discard them without a second thought. That's not just bad business. It's immoral." The turning point, a question of values. The room fell silent as Karoline continued. "Let me ask you something, Mr. Grayson. How much did you earn last year? 10 million? 20 million? And yet, you're cutting jobs to save a few pennies on the dollar. Meanwhile, Joe makes $15 an hour and has to worry about how he's going to pay for his wife's medical bills. Does that seem fair to you?" Grayson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "This isn't about fairness," he snapped. "It's about survival." "No," Karoline shot back. "It's about priorities. You're prioritizing profits over people, and that's a choice. But let me tell you something. The American people are watching. They're tired of seeing CEOs like you rake in millions, while hardworking men and women like Joe struggle to make ends meet. And they're not going to stand for it anymore." The emotional appeal, Joe's story. Karoline turned to Joe, who had been sitting quietly, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Joe, would you mind telling everyone here what this job means to you?" Joe hesitated for a moment, then stood. His voice was soft but steady. "I came to this country 25 years ago with nothing but the clothes on my back. This job gave me a chance to build a life for my family. It's not just a paycheck. It's my dignity. It's how I provide for my wife and kids. If I lose this job, I don't know what I'll do." The room was silent. Even Grayson seemed momentarily shaken. But Karoline wasn't finished. "This isn't just about Joe," she said, her voice rising. "It's about every worker who's been treated as expendable. It's about every family that's been left behind by corporate greed. And it's about the kind of country we want to be. Do we want to be a nation that values people over profits? Or are we going to let CEOs like Mr. Grayson decide that some lives are worth less than others?" The CEO's retreat, a victory for the little guy. For the first time, Grayson seemed unsure of himself. He glanced around the room, searching for support, but found none. Even his executives looked uncomfortable, their eyes avoiding his. Karoline's defense of Joe Martinez didn't just make headlines. It sparked a movement. Across the country, workers who had felt invisible and undervalued began to speak out. Stories of corporate greed and worker exploitation flooded social media, and the public's outrage grew. In the weeks that followed, several other companies reversed similar outsourcing decisions, fearing the backlash that Grayson Enterprises had faced. Politicians on both sides of the aisle were forced to address the growing discontent, with many introducing legislation to protect workers' rights and curb corporate excess. Karoline, meanwhile, became a symbol of hope for millions. Her impassioned defense of Joe resonated with people from all walks of life, reminding them that they were not alone in their struggles. "She's not just fighting for Joe," one supporter said. "She's fighting for all of us." In interviews following the boardroom showdown, Karoline opened up about what had driven her to take up Joe's cause. "My father was a factory worker," she said. "He worked long hours to provide for our family, and I saw firsthand how hard he struggled. When I heard Joe's story, it hit close to home. I knew I had to do something." Her personal connection to the issue only deepened the public's admiration. "She's not just talking the talk," one commentator noted. "She's walking the walk. And that's why people trust her." The CEO's redemption? In the aftermath of the boardroom battle, Alexander Grayson found himself at a crossroads. The public backlash had been severe, and the company's stock price had taken a hit. Faced with mounting pressure, Grayson issued a public apology and announced a series of reforms aimed at improving working conditions and employee benefits. "I made a mistake," he admitted in a press conference. "I lost sight of what's truly important. I want to thank Ms. Leavitt for holding me accountable and giving me the opportunity to make things right." While some were skeptical of Grayson's sincerity, others saw it as a step in the right direction. "It's never too late to change," Karoline said when asked about Grayson's apology. "But actions speak louder than words. We'll be watching." Karoline's defense of Joe Martinez marked the beginning of a new chapter in the fight for corporate responsibility. It was a reminder that businesses have a moral obligation to their employees, not just their shareholders. Profit is important, Karoline said in a speech following the incident, but it should never come at the expense of people's lives and livelihoods. Her words struck a chord with business leaders across the country, many of whom began to reevaluate their own practices. Karoline Leavitt has changed the conversation, one CEO said. She's shown us that doing the right thing isn't just good ethics, it's good business. Karoline Leavitt's defense of Joe Martinez was more than just a victory for one man. It was a victory for every American who has ever felt overlooked or undervalued. It was a reminder that true leadership isn't about power or prestige. It's about standing up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you. As the nation watched, Karoline Leavitt proved once again that she was a force to be reckoned with, a leader who wasn't afraid to take on the elite and fight for the people who matter most. And in doing so, she inspired a nation to believe that change is possible, one courageous act at a time. Her legacy would be one of courage, justice, and unwavering commitment to the values that make America great. And for Joe Martinez and countless others, it was a reminder that no matter how tough the fight, they would never have to face it alone.